We're going to do this. My Hero Schmaximacademia.
That should definitely be the title of the episode.
My Hero Schmaximacademia?
Yeah.
Macadamia Nut Hero.
The end of Macadamia Heroes.
I love me some macadamia nuts and Boku no Hero Macadamia.
TNMP, the Nerdy Misfit Podcast, with your hosts, Connor O'Neill and Matthew Hughes.
Yo, what is
Hello?
up? Nerdy Misfits. Welcome back to another episode of the Nerdy Misfit Podcast.
It's here we are. Another episode in August. Happy episode 120, I think.
Yeah.
That sounds right.
This episode was going to be potentially
Couple
earlier,
weeks ago.
but we had
Life gets
busy
in the way.
vacations, etc.
Exactly.
But spoiler is ahead. If you have not completed My Hero Academia
In
manga.
any regard, yeah, manga. The manga's finished. They're on.
and we're discussing the whole series.
whole
So,
story is thing. So spoiler alert for the manga. Spoiler alert for the anime if you're not caught up to the anime.
yes. So please come back. This is going to be a celebration discussion
10 years.
of My Hero.
Exactly.
So without further ado, into Deku's story, I guess.
Exactly. How he became the greatest hero.
Yes.
Not to be
We-
confused.
Just before recording, we learned that seems to be some sort of Mandela effect going on with people thinking Deku said that it was a story of him becoming the #1 hero, which if you've read and finished My Hero, you know,
that ain't the case.
that doesn't happen.
He doesn't become.
or it's never really specified,
no, it is specified that Lemillion is #1 hero. At
but
that
it was
point.
an 8-year time skip.
True.
We don't know. Maybe at one point he was.
Maybe he's like, just kidding, guys.
Yeah, you know, maybe he reached that #1 rank for a hot minute. Maybe he didn't.
Exactly. But
I don't know.
Let's just all read a little blurb here that we have here. My Hero Academia, or Boku no Hero Academia. It's a manga series written by Horikoshi.
Yep. Horikoshi Sensei.
And it's come to the end after 10 years. First serialized on July 7th, 2014.
That's one day before my birthday.
Shout out to Connor's birthday. The anime began April 3rd, 2016, animated by Studio Bones. And the anime will obviously continue until the completion, but the manga has come to an end as of August 4th, 2024, with over 100 million sales, making it an extremely successful series.
Yeah, it's one of a very few books in general that have reached, like a book series that have reached 100 million sales, especially if you want to condense that down to manga. I feel like pretty much was a staple in like the top 5 for yearly sales for manga.
Yeah, even in anime, like some of the more popular anime, like this is...
Yep.
Originally it was. I'd say
Yeah.
after season 3, it kind of became a little bit less popular.
I feel like that's common for a lot of
But-
shows once there starts becoming a lot of seasons.
Definitely.
Currently the anime is like 151 plus episodes. I checked. I don't know if that's including the current season that's actually airing right now,
Yeah.
but
I can pull it
obviously
up while
we're gonna have multiple
discussing.
seasons after. It'll probably end up being around close to 200 episodes, maybe less.
Now, my question for you before we go into full this, do you think they're gonna do? At this point, I guess we can just call it the Attack on Titan, where
Going into movies for final arcs.
going into the movies, like how Demon Slayer is.
We haven't seen Studio Bones do anything like that yet.
Okay.
Ufotable has done movies, so it's no surprise that it wasn't really a surprise that Demon Slayer did a movie.
Mm-hmm.
It was a little bit more surprising that they started as a seasonal show, then all of a sudden there was an actual canon arc that was a movie. When you think of Ufotable, you think of the Heaven's Feel movies,
Yeah.
which are stories that they kept
It's expanded
in
canon
movies.
almost.
Well, they
yeah.
kept them in movies.
Yeah.
Right? They're like, okay, we released the first one, second one, those are all movies. It wasn't, oh, this came out as an episode format first, and then we did movies. It's
Yeah.
like they kept that contained as a trilogy, where Demon Slayer originally was episodes. It was interesting to see them do. And then they made so much money that obviously now they're, does feel like a bit of milking, but Ufotable also backs it up.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, Demon Slayer animation, beautiful.
Maybe that money, I'm hoping that money goes towards continuing to do the job
Yeah.
that they're doing,
Do
whether
you
that's
think-
hire more people, etc.
It's kind of off topic, but do you think with Demon Slayer being movies as the final seasons, do you think they're also going to chop them up and put them into seasons like they did for...
Probably. They'll
yeah.
probably end up doing that. Obviously, with the success of Demon Slayer, we saw Attack on Titan do that. MAPPA brought out some movies as well. I do expect it to be a trend. Haiku, obviously, now also following this. And that's Production IG, I believe, for studio. So we haven't seen Bones do it yet.
Part of me, I think it kind of makes sense because you want to get on that hype.
You want to get the hype. Also, you can make so much money off of it, and that's at the end of the day, that's what they want. They want the dollars.
I'm gonna be honest with you. My Hero Academia, the final arc, if they made it into a movie or two, I wouldn't necessarily be mad because I feel like it'd almost be easier to follow in comparison to episodic form.
No, I think the episodes would be fine.
But it would be okay overall.
Think about any of the big fights that happen in My Hero anime. They're fine. They're all well choreographed. Some of them are even extended a bit, which is kind of what we've talked about before, is something you kind of want to see. You want to see a change, a difference in the manga to the anime, because if there's no real change, then why are you watching the anime?
Yeah, that's fair.
But without further ado, we'll get into more, kind of have a little cheat sheet for us that we wrote up.
So first thing first, Connor, what got you into My Hero Academia? What attracted you to it?
So yeah, My Hero Academia is a shonen series.
That's it. That's the end.
It's Shonen Jump. Has been a core series, like I just mentioned, for at least, let's say, 9 years. I don't know. We didn't get the exact sales per year, but it's been consistently at the top of sales, a pillar, if you will, for Jump. And at my core, I would say I'm a big shonen person, so I'm willing to at least try.
Yeah.
Any popular shonen. Maybe some I'm not as big of a fan of. Sorry to any fairy tale fans, but I've given it a try multiple times. Not into it, but I always give something a try.
Yeah.
And My Hero came out actually when the anime came out, when I was very into comics. Heavily reading comics. And my brother actually was like, hey, I think you'll like this anime I've been watching. It's about superheroes. He's like, it's very, Western kind of based, if you will, definitely inspired by Western comics. And he explained it as, like, everyone has powers, some have better powers than others, and it's like like a gene factor almost. And I was like, oh, okay. So obviously initially you think of X-Men, the X gene, that everyone's mutating into having abilities. And he's like, yeah, and they all go to school. And I was like,
it seems familiar.
Okay. And I was like, is there a bald man that's like, but no, it's a rat.
Yeah.
So obviously initially you're like, and my brother always recommends things that he knows I'll like, but I'm a bit, I have to do things at my own pace.
You're preaching to the choir. You know that. I'm very much the same way.
Like, you can keep being, oh, Connor, you'll like this. Watch this. And that could be true. And probably is true. It's just you have to figure out a way to finesse it, Like, so an example would be, my brother was into anime before me. And the way he got me into anime was he'd just put it on when we were like hanging out. And then be like, oh yeah, let's watch this together. And then I would. And we've mentioned this in previous podcasts of how I've got into anime manga as a whole.
Yeah.
And yeah, then just kind of flown from there. So My Hero, eventually I did watch it. And I was like, hey, I finally started watching that show that you mentioned. This is probably like a year later.
Yeah.
I think like when season 2 was about to come out is when I ended up watching. And I was like, you were right. It's pretty good. I like it. And it's actually nothing like X-Men at all. Obviously, there are some familiar tones and stuff. I think people being judged based on what power they have.
Yeah.
Kind of similar to X-Men, where X-Men obviously deals with the whole concept of this minority group that is judged because they have powers. I saw a funny meme. I think I sent it to you where it was the Marvel universe as a whole, and it's like Marvel heroes who get injected to get powers. Yay. Then it's like Marvel heroes who work for their powers. Yay. Born with their powers. Oh my gosh, you're disgusting. And it's like, damn, it's kind of true. Because they look up to Captain America or someone like Doctor Strange, and then you're an X-Men, and it's like, no, thank you. That's just not right.
Yeah.
But obviously, it's not quite like X-Men. Definitely inspired, for sure.
Yeah.
And if you've ever seen any interviews with Horikoshi, like in his like space where he writes, he's got tons of Western comics and like statues and whatnot of different heroes. But I would say the familiarity is a very good bridge for people that perhaps are into comics or like DC movies, etc. It's a good DC animated movies. Good bridge to be like, oh, like I'm kind of gonna dip my toes into this Japanese anime manga field because it does feel a little bit familiar.
Yeah, I would agree with that for sure.
Obviously, I feel like I don't have to explain to you guys who are watching this because you've probably seen it, but obviously My Hero is a story of a powerless kid wanting to become the world's greatest hero, which very broad, could be many things. And there's a school that trains the best heroes, known for training the best heroes.
UA High, baby.
And there's obviously testing to get into it, et cetera, et cetera. But this school's not like they're being taken in like X-Men. It's people want to be heroes.
Yeah.
Hero is a profitable thing. It's a marketable thing.
Yeah.
And
there's agencies to
exactly.
become
You want to get in there and be a hero, some for good and some for money.
Yeah.
And I don't know, I thought the whole concept was cool. Obviously a lot of the powers are very interesting, especially the powers that involve people being anamorphic or like look wise is no longer more humanoid of mixed with something else.
Yeah.
That as opposed to just I'm a human who can shoot fire. I'm a human who can do this. It's like I'm a crow.
I am a orca
who has a shadow power, which has no relation
No,
to
it
why
really
he looks
doesn't.
like a bird.
We just accept it.
Yeah.
We just accept it.
And we accept that that's his quirk, is that he is a bird. Well, that's not his quirk, but also it's part of his quirk because he's no longer just a
Boy, he's a
human.
bird man.
I wonder how the
Bird man with
DNA
a
works for
shadow.
that. But anyways,
Yeah.
what about you? Well, I assume something similar.
Yeah, so I mean, for those who don't know, I mean, if you're this far into the podcast overall of joining us in the Nerdy Misfit podcast, you know that Connor got into anime first, and then he dragged me into it. I say dragged loosely, but at this point, Connor had the first 2 seasons on DVD for My Hero because this was back when Connor was owned it on Blu-ray. This is when Connor was actively collecting physical anime.
Yeah, I only do very series that I really love,
And at that point, you did.
or movies I really love.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just expensive.
Yeah. Especially
It's-
anime DVDs,
yeah.
Blu-rays is
They're
pretty penny.
they're expensive. So I've greatly
Yeah.
reduced. Like I don't even remember the last one I got. I think the last one I got was
Probably the Heaven's Field trilogy. Oh, maybe did you grab a copy of Suzume?
I don't have Suzume yet. I think the last one I got was I finished the Fruits Basket.
Okay.
The new one.
Gotcha.
The redone version. I finished I got the final season of that. I do need to finish my Attack on Titan. I've been kind of waiting for the movies to come out and just buy it as a whole. But
Makes sense. But yeah, so Connor, I also had this thing too where I wasn't really purchasing streaming services yet. Connor makes the thing about how people tell him to do something, it's like his own pace. That was me with Crunchyroll for the longest time. And Funimation.
Matt basically avoided at all costs. He's like, I'll just watch whatever's on Netflix.
Yeah, and I was on Netflix
Even
anime.
shows he started and was like, I really like that show. Like for example, My Hero.
Yeah.
Watched my Blu-rays. Was like, yeah, I really like it. That's it.
That's
It's
it.
on Netflix? No, okay, I can't watch
That's
it.
how I did with One Piece. When I started watching One Piece, I was borrowing your One Piece DVDs originally, right?
You took a massive, your break was until basically you read the manga for the podcast.
Yeah, that literally was because you had up to the time skip on DVD.
Yeah, and they weren't doing stuff. They only, I think around when, or maybe a little just before we started the podcast was when they finally started dubbing again.
Yeah.
And now they're caught up.
Yeah, now, which is crazy.
They're on the current arc, which
is impressive.
I think it's because One Piece ended up having almost a secondary it's probably the fourth boom
Boost.
of One Piece.
Yeah, exactly.
Where it's had such an explosion in popularity, and I think that Sony's Funimation / now Crunchyroll altogether, they were like, okay, let's get through this because some people just don't watch subbed, so let's have
Yeah,
this dubbed and
exactly.
people watch
And I
it.
used to be one of those people. I used to not watch sub at all.
Hey, dubbed is easy to
But
watch. I mean, if you
dub
speak
is-
English,
Easy peasy.
it's easier.
But anyways, yeah. So then I started. You were introducing My Hero to me, and like everyone knows who listens to the podcast, I'm a big X-Men fan. And around the time, I just double checked. Around the time you were getting into My Hero and you recommended it to me was when I was heavy into X-Men comics, reading X-Men Gold, X-Men Blue, Extraordinary X-Men, and this was after Secret Wars 3. So
I was gonna
Old
say,
Man
yeah, it's around
Logan.
Secret Wars 3 for sure.
Old Man Logan was in the main timeline, and Laura was now the main Wolverine.
Miles was now in the
Miles
main
was main continuity. Spider-Gwen was main continuity. But like in the X-Men series, you had like really cool teams because you had like Kitty with Old Man Logan and Nightcrawler, and
I remember when you were collecting those, and you were like, ugh, like you were both loving it but hating it
yeah,
because you're like, there's too many X-Men comics, and they mesh together,
they do.
and it's part of it does feel a bit like a money grab. Like, oh, if you're an X-Men fan, you gotta collect all 4 of these. Similar to Green Lantern when you
Yeah.
were reading all the lanterns
I just love teams apparently,
that can be separated into single
Yeah.
character.
but
Running
let's see here.
teams.
Yeah, X-Men Gold was Old Man Logan, Kitty Pryde, Rachel Gray, Colossus, Storm, and Nightcrawler. So it was like a revamp of the Uncanny or the Uncanny X-Men or Giant Size X-Men, like
Yes.
from the 80s kind of thing like that. And then like X-Men Blue, which had like the younger versions because some of the younger X-Men were still in the main timeline, etc. And I was like really big. I remember reading those like bi-weekly when they were coming out. So I think this was automatically attraction to me. I was like, yo, kids with special powers in a school? I'm basically reading this right now. I was watching an anime version of it. And I think I was very intrigued by it because, like you said, like all the characters are unique. There's not too many characters where you're like, oh, you have the exact same power. And if they did, it was somehow connected into it.
It was
more or less.
connected. There's also just unique powers in general, which is tough to do now.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you had literally one character who had like jacks for ears.
Oh yeah, you're Jack.
Yeah, and you're like, okay, cool,
Different.
different, but it still worked. Like,
Obviously, you had some powers that were more run of the mill, I guess you could say. There was
fire and
someone who
ice
could-
powers,
The engine calves, like, although unique in terms of how the speed, the power was speed.
just speed. Yeah,
You know,
electricity guy,
yeah, that one's pretty.
Red
run-of-the-mill.
Riot, who's just Colossus, like hard skin kind of thing.
Yeah, there were obviously in some of the heroes like Mount Lady.
Yeah.
Gets big.
Yeah.
But you have like those powers make sense to
Yeah.
have.
I mean, Hawks is just a man with wings who's able to control feathers. That was kind of like to me
His
that-
power was cool.
Oh, that was inspired by Archangel for sure, because
Yeah.
Archangel in the comics was able to control individual feathers, and Hawk's great. Like, there's a reason why he was the number 2 hero.
He's a very and writing wise was a very cool,
Yeah.
interesting character as well. But yeah, his power definitely has been done. Very cool power though, nonetheless. Lemillion had a very unique power feeling.
Yep.
Especially when the explanation of how the power originally was useless and he made it what it was.
Exactly.
I thought that was really clever. Clever use of writing and showing. It's kind of like One Piece, where think of Luffy early on. You're like, oh, he just stretches, but then his creativity and what he
It's what
makes of
incorporates
it,
it too. Yeah.
you're like, okay. It's like, what can you do with your power?
Exactly.
Right?
100%.
And that's how a lot of their powers ended up being like. Some of them used it in very creative ways. And then we also had a frog. The powers of a frog. Never seen that before, eh?
Never.
Okay, so let's dive into
Anyways,
some
yeah,
pros
some
and
pros
cons.
and cons here. Do you want me to start? Do you want?
Well, yeah, your list is relatively...
no, like it's. I know.
You
I
want me to go through mine and then you can just...
no. I go first because I mean I'm reading through yours and I'm like it's actually pretty similar. But like,
Well, I just think one of our big one that's the same is, and you did a lot more negative sounding, but there is a
Yeah.
positive to it as well.
agreed.
Let's start with the con of it, which is it did feel like as a class of 20, perhaps not everyone got. We knew that not everyone was going to get the same amount of
Definitely.
exposure and development. However, only really going in on like 3 or 4.
Max 5.
Some of them did get their own
like sub
little arcs.
Yeah, like with
the class president kind of got his own
with
with
his brother dying
and
and everything, and the hero killer.
Yeah, same.
So-
He did, but then that was kind of it.
Yeah.
Red
Red Riot kind of got it during like the Sir Night Eye arc.
He got a
like,
little bit.
But again, it's just like Uravity didn't really have an arc. Tsui didn't really have an arc.
She was kind of always there, but not as much as you
Yeah.
probably would want. And then you look at and apologies for not remembering everyone's names. This is the other issue.
Yeah.
Some of them were so
Sugar Man, who was like that weird man who like baits and
Invisible
stuff.
Girl,
Invisible Girl, completely relevant.
Tail Guy.
Tail Man, that was his name. Completely relevant. My gosh, the guy who could talk to animals.
Like there were they had moments,
Yeah, in the
But
final
nothing-
arc, they had little moments like
but never. Not even just that. In some of the arcs they had moments, but not really anything that was crazy or like, oh, I'm gonna remember this guy for the rest of the
No.
series because
you had your core 3.
Yeah, there were definitely 3 outliers, and then the rest of the pack. And then like the back was like, and then Class B, there's basically one character
Yeah, one character that's important
who
for
pretty much
part of
joins
the
Class
story.
A. So,
Yeah.
and I would say the only guy that I remember other than that is the guy that has a very similar power to Red Riot, but he turns into metal.
Yes, I think so.
I don't remember his name. I just know that they're so similar,
Yeah.
and that's why I remember him. Not because I remember his name, but just because his power is very similar
Yeah.
to another character.
So that's like 5 characters right there. And then even with the whole like heroes stuff, like really 1, 2, 3, 4 or 5 heroes are important.
That's more arc based, I would say. The
Yeah.
kind of like the heroes that end up, because if you look at the training arc where they go to the
the 4
the survival or the
camp.
camp,
Yeah, the summer camp.
like they're focusing on that unit
That
of
group
heroes.
4, yeah, for sure.
And then they become less important, but that's also outside of their arc now, so it's like
Yeah.
kind of understandable. And they weren't top ranked heroes; they
No.
were just one of the top ranked rescue
Groups of some
I
sort.
guess.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
not focused on necessarily villain fighting, but like natural disasters and etc.
Obviously, the big heroes then is obviously All Might, Endeavor,
Endeavor,
Hawks.
Gran
Gran Torino, you can make the argument because he was there at the beginning and then he was kind of reoccurring throughout. He's the
the rabbit chick,
she was important there.
Genist,
Oh, best genist.
Headshot.
Yeah, if you made it in the top 10, you were kind of
That's the thing. Like if you were to top
a
hero,
Racerhead, obviously.
as we started getting higher and higher up with in the story, we started having bigger threats.
Yeah.
The bigger heroes end up coming and becoming more relevant. But this con also is a pro, which is the characters that did get focused on, not just Deku, who you'd expect it to get,
Mhm.
like the supporting cast, also had some really good stories, some good character development and character progression as a whole. Like I'm thinking of Bakugo, Todoroki, massive changes to their main character, to
Definitely.
their character, Endeavor. Like some of them, Hawks even, like had some great stories, great progression with the character. You could actually see where they were.
Oh
and
yeah,
where they
Endeavor at the
became.
beginning versus Endeavor at the
Oh,
end. It's
he's probably the best
completely
character
different. Yeah.
overall in terms of just the story
Yeah,
and
and then
following him.
we're not even including the villains yet either.
And that's the thing.
like-
I think the cast that does get the light
It's great.
is pretty well done.
Yeah.
And that's a pro. It's just there were too many characters. And I would never say there's too many characters in One Piece because we love One Piece.
One Piece
But
is a
look at-
traveling manga though,
But
so like
also look at how the crew's only 10 people?
Yeah.
9 people, and they're always separated because it's
Exactly.
tough to follow. That's half the amount of people.
one thing that I am going to say for a con before we move into pro, and I was surprised you didn't have this actually, is that oh wait, no, I just read it. You do have it here. And I'm going to read exactly what too many people live and they should die.
Yes.
I
There
think-
was a fear of killing people off, I think.
Yeah, he killed one. Well, no, there's actually like
There's-
12
we
deaths.
went over this
but
a couple weeks
There's
ago
only
together.
one big death in the entire manga.
Yes.
And that is Sir Night Eye, which is season 4 of the anime because I just recently watched it. Yeah, Sir Night Eye
We-
is
have a few characters that definitely have moments in which it would have been more impactful if they do die.
all I'm saying is All Might should have died.
And some of the characters who die off screen with zero impact. And that's
Exactly.
someone like Midnight, who is a teacher in the story. We've seen her multiple times
Yep.
throughout the story. And she has an off-screen death. And it could have been anyone because that's how irrelevant it was.
Exactly.
But then you have people like the rabbit hero. Why can't I remember her name? I think it starts with an M. Mirko, that's it. It does start with an M. She avoids death. Like I would have thought she was a cat hero. It almost feels like
She had 9 lives.
like the amount of times she's like missing a foot, missing an arm by the end of it. It's crazy. Definitely probably should have died. I think of someone like Eraserhead has his moment where probably he should. The problem with they couldn't kill Eraserhead because his power was too important for the final fight.
Yeah.
But
I mean, the big one, too, is the Nomu that fought Endeavor and almost killed Endeavor.
I don't think Endeavor could, like...
I don't think he should have died there, per se, because he just became the #1 hero. And that
Dobby.
just... Yeah.
He should have died.
Dobby should have died.
He also died technically twice and lived, which is crazy. There's a lot of his game. Bakugo, Edgeshot. There's a bunch of characters.
I guess Star and Stripe did die. That was the one.
As another one. But
yeah,
short-lived.
Short-lived.
Shows up,
yeah.
does like their big boom move, and then gone.
I do appreciate him killing off Sir Night-Eye, though. Like that.
It was a good arc. That was a great
good
arc.
It was good to show a human side of the hero aspect, basically. I know Sir Night-Eye also had a quirk.
Yep.
But it showed... I think at that point, it was before the whole story of My Hero got to be too big, in my opinion. Because this was where we had a couple good arcs, we had some good fights, we established the villains, etc., etc. We introduced like a sub-gang kind of thing to show that there's more than one villain group.
Yeah, an Overhaul was a great villain too.
Exactly. And you also saw like complications within the hero world, being like, yeah, like just because you're friends with someone around this time doesn't mean you're gonna stay friends. Like,
we showed that there was a human element of like there's drama, there's we were once friends and now we're not.
Exactly.
Batman / like Night like Robin like split up and people creating their own agency to go against who their mentors were.
And it showed you also being like, hey, how do you become a hero in the long run?
It also showed Night is a good example of a hero that uses his power to the best of his ability. His power is not going to help him necessarily as much, and he realizes because he's obviously very intelligent. He's not going to be a All Might.
Yeah.
But he can run an agency and make it as efficient as possible and know so using his power help stop things before they happen using the chess pieces, if you will, that he has at his disposal.
Exactly. Yeah, so going into pros, Sir Night-Eye dying was a pro, actually.
But that's like a cop-out. Like,
that is a cop-out.
Overall, there were too many people that lived that definitely should have died.
Yeah.
Too many ass pulls for saving people's lives, I think, is... nothing fits it more than how emotionally impactful it would have been if Bakugo died.
I think if All Might died at the end,
And we went a few chapters without Bakugo, and we were like, oh, it actually...
Did he actually happen?
And
Did he
then
not?
Edgeshot, you think, is sacrificing himself to save Bakugo, but then he also ends up living.
Yeah, it doesn't make sense.
But let's go into some pros. Yeah. We already said supporting characters is strong, other than once we reach out of the too big of a cast.
Yeah. I think the concept overall as a whole seemed interesting. Like he up to that point, again, I think I'm using Sir Night-Eye as like the break point before it got too big.
But what do you mean by too big?
Like I think it just the story itself became too much to handle.
For who?
I think like we've kind of talked about this off screen, but like with the world he created, there became too many characters. And I think
that's just a part of the world.
No, I agree with that.
Like I never felt after that Overhaul arc that it was getting out of hand. And I've never thought that the series was done poorly. I think obviously after the Overhaul we go into one of the weaker arcs, but it was more of a chill arc because of how emotionally impactful the previous arc was.
Definitely.
So it made sense to have a cooldown arc. But right after that cooldown arc, it's pretty much
go.
Yeah, there's nonstop go after that. And I don't know, I thought it was really well done. I thought he did a good job of giving the villains a lot of the kind of like the limelight, which feels like it doesn't happen a lot.
No, that's one of my favorite arcs is the My Hero or My Villain Academia.
Like having the villains be showcased a lot and how they all became villains, and we get deeper and deeper into those backstories as we get further in the series, and you're like, oh, okay, like I kind of get why you're. It's kind of like One Piece, where like some of the villains you're like, oh, you're not really a villain. Oh, okay, yeah, ooh, wow,
I
okay,
feel
I get
bad
it
for you actually,
Yeah.
but you're still the bad guy, so I can't
Like,
root for you. But
One of them is like, I remember like Katakuri,
Mhm.
and all he's doing is just being a good big brother.
Yep.
Like that's kind of just like he wants to be the big brother that all of his siblings look up to and know that they've got him in their corner and he's gonna make sure they're always safe and okay. But he was like bullied by all of his siblings that are close to age and
yeah,
stuff. And you're like, oh man, I feel bad for literally a villain in One Piece. Or even Big Mom's backstory. You're kind of like,
yeah.
But back to my hero.
Yeah.
I thought the concept of the world was interesting. Obviously, it revolves around powers once the powers are introduced, and I liked how it did feel almost similar to how real society would be, where it would be monopolized. It would be people would be trying to make as much money off as possible off of this. If you have a good power and you're a good hero, yeah, let's market them. Let's get them on cereal boxes,
Yeah.
et cetera, et cetera. Let's make that is something that would happen in the real world. Like capitalism would take over for heroes, and it's no different in the world of My Hero Academia, which is supposed to take place in our concept of the world.
Yeah.
Like people are going to this school where you can either be going into the hero class A and B. There's a support class, which is all about creating support gadgets or other technology for assisting those heroes. There's a management course specific. And we're talking about high school.
Yeah.
You're going into management course knowing you're going to be trying to be a manager or be heavily involved in the business sense of the heroes. Then
Better
you finally
version
go
of
into
Sky
general
High.
education, which general education makes sense. There's obviously going to be people who are just going to be running the world in general to help keep everything going.
Yeah.
And I found that was a very realistic view of how the society would kind of be. And the greater your power is, the more looked up or like top of the food chain you'll be. That's just kind of unfortunate. And that's why Deku is such a good example, because he has no powers. And what does he do? Happens to him in school? Bullied, beat the crap out of, crapped on the whole time because he has no power. As if he already doesn't feel bad enough. He's got all these people just, shitting on him. One of them obviously being Bakugo, who has an interesting power, which part of me does think it's dangerous for those kids when you think about it.
Yeah.
Bakugo's ability is his sweat glands are, what is it, nitroglycerin?
Yeah.
Sweat, and they blow up. There should really be something to stop kids from having their powers. Like, it sounds bad, but also, like, you should have to wear, like, not an inhibitor collar, because that sounds inhumane, but a bracelet.
But
like a bracelet. Like an inhibitor bracelet.
Yeah.
Because,
Something to dampen your powers, basically.
yeah, what's stopping a kid from just
blowing up the
blowing-
school?
blowing up someone?
Exactly.
That's all.
Sorry, the more you talk, the more I realize how similar this feels to a movie that we watched when we were younger.
It really is like Sky High. Very similar.
The main character is quirkless, who
but
doesn't get
he's
powers.
not quirkless.
But he's not. But I mean, technically, neither is.
He's a late
Deku.
bloomer.
He's a late bloomer.
Deku's not a late bloomer, though.
True. The bully of the school has fire powers,
Yeah.
and they don't get along, and then they become friends by the end.
And there's a plant guy.
There's a plant guy, and the villain kind of had a weird thing, but not a thing for the main character.
Yeah.
One of Togem's characters confused.
It's just very similar. There's a
Yeah.
school for people who
Yeah.
are to become heroes to go to learn about controlling their powers, evolve their powers, and save the world.
Freaking love Sky High. Sorry, just
This
Underrated.
one
Anyways.
is a slight con, which is some of the arcs did feel a little bit more dragged out. Some of the long form storytelling fell a bit short. My perfect example is the mole.
yeah.
Everyone cared about who the mole was. Season 1, 2,
So many
3.
theories behind who the mole was.
It was massive, and then it's just never really brought up again because there's so much other stuff going on. And then when
like a good
then when it's finally revealed, everyone's like, yeah, whatever.
yeah, we're so moved past that.
Like, we don't care. Like, we no longer care. I felt like when it was at its peak, it would have been a lot better to drop that bomb.
Or keep foreshadowing it.
Yeah,
Like
keep mentioning
he
it.
stopped
You stopped talking-
completely.
I didn't even think there was a mole anymore.
No, exactly. And like the hints that he did have just didn't.
When it was finally revealed, I was like, oh, yeah, that.
Well, the only other foreshadowing was him, that student, being obsessed with Deku, like leaving
Yeah,
cheese
following-
at his door and stuff.
Yeah, following him, looking through his window, you see him do a couple times, like weird stuff.
You're like, oh, that's just the character, and you move on. But
And people obviously, that was one of the people but at that point, everyone guessed everyone. So, this one's for definitely the anime. The OST overall was solid, very
Great.
good, iconic songs playing all the time.
oh yeah,
Whenever they're like whenever All Might would show up, and you got like that. I can't
the
remember
hero is here.
I don't remember the
Epic
name of the
music.
song. Yeah, but it would
Yeah.
play, and you're just like, oh yeah, like I'm hyped
Great
now.
score, honestly. Yeah,
Openings were great, endings were great, and Studio Bones, for the most part, I think some of the middle seasons have been hit or miss, but most of the time the fights have been fantastic.
Yeah.
Fantastic fight choreography. The animation's been pretty consistent overall. I have no complaints. They've done a great job. I think it's a long running series, so when other stuff like JJK or whatnot pops up, people just the new flashy thing, people are gonna be, oh,
yeah.
that, and they forget My Hero Academia is still going on and it's still done well. It's not
Yeah.
like they haven't really dropped the quality, which is rare. I feel like when
It's
you get
impressive for
what are we
going
on,
into
season
7. Yeah,
and they're still going strong. They're still doing a great job. So respect for that. That's definitely a pro. Some series do feel like once you get past even season 1, if we looking at one of our favorite manga,
still breaks my heart.
and the season 1 was done so well, and then they
So
didn't care.
good.
Yeah, and then they didn't care.
They're like, oh, the hype's there. Cool, let's finish it
I
up,
guess we'll
guys.
find out on season 8. That'll be the big test for Bones for My Hero because it's done. The manga's done. How much do
I
they still
hope
care?
they don't rush it.
How much do they still care? And then this one's tough, but I did feel like the epilogue was very mid. It felt rushed at certain like we'd had the time skip, but then I didn't even feel like I cared because it was so whatever, like so bland.
I'd almost want like a couple time skips to be like, this is what happened 2 years after, and dot dot dot, and then this is what's the
Yeah.
end of it.
It was
I feel like I missed something reading the epilogue.
and it just jumps into like Deku being a teacher, and they're like, "Oh yeah, the flame flared out," and you're like, "What? So what? He just peaked in high school, and that was that?" Like,
Apparently,
and the teacher, I like him being a teacher. I like that.
that makes sense.
And especially, he was always like the Notebook. He's very similar to if anyone's watched Kaiju number 8. It's like using your knowledge of heroes and stuff
Yeah.
to your advantage. Having a knowledge base is good, even
Exactly.
if you don't have powers anymore. You can help others, right? And so it makes sense that Deku would be a good teacher. He could help others, especially when you look at all the training he's done to be able to use One for All. That he'd be able to help younger generations use their powers and become great heroes.
I think
The way we got there was
yeah.
messy, rushed.
The one thing I think kind of fell flat for me was the Uravity and Deku situation.
Yeah, I thought when he randomly showed up to the
at the rock, like at
that
the
he
end,
was going to confess there, but he really didn't.
Yeah, they just don't end up together. Which again, it's both a pro and a con because this is a big shonen that didn't focus too much on relationshipy stuff out
It's
of like
just that
Toga making fun of her.
Yeah, but she definitely had a crush.
Oh
and,
yeah,
and I'm not saying like I don't think you need to ship everyone, like kind of like what Naruto did. I think that was a little much, shipping everyone into everything. Like certain
Yeah.
relationships make sense. Like I really like the Shikamaru Tamari
yeah, that's a great
because it felt so natural.
exactly.
It's one of the few relationships in Naruto that make sense, that feels good.
You mean
because
Choji and his?
but there's so much
person?
similarities between Shikamaru's dad and his mom
Yeah,
relationship and Shikamaru and Tamari that you're like, oh,
makes
like
sense.
it's so cool. The other ones are like people stalking them.
Yeah.
Sakura stalks Sasuke,
Hinata's.
but then they end up
weird.
together.
Yeah,
Hinata stalks Naruto, and they end up together. Like what? You just stalk someone, you'll get it eventually. Like I don't
Yeah.
know. I didn't like that in Naruto. In here, it was definitely like a cutesy crush that doesn't end up becoming anything. But I actually would not have been upset if it did because it's the only one that's ever really hinted at.
Yeah.
Right? And Deku's just clueless because he's like in his own world doing his own thing. He's got a lot going on. So it makes sense that he wouldn't notice at that point.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't have been upset if they did end up together. But yeah, it was very like all that for nothing kind of felt nah.
Moving on. Anime and manga, which do you prefer?
It's always a tough question when it comes to shonen. I think some series, especially different genres, it's almost easier to always say manga. I think there's obviously pros and cons to both. I think Bones did a good job. I thought overall there wasn't a fight I was disappointed in.
Yeah.
From the manga put onto the screen. They're all very fluid. They feel great. I think of like the overhaul the million fight is epic. I think of the sports tournament Todoroki versus Deku. There's
Even
some
the fight between Deku and the dude at the camp.
Yeah, like there's
that's
some
it's a good
great
fight
fights.
choreography, yeah, for sure.
And I don't think I ever felt as on the edge of my seat reading those fights as I did watching them.
Yeah.
Which has got me very excited for the final battle saga when it's animated, because I feel like we're going to see some pretty epic fights that feel a lot better watching than reading them.
Agreed. And that's similar to my feel
As long
too.
as the Bones stays consistent with how they've been doing things. But I guess overall, I'm always gonna be pushing more towards manga, just because when you get those lull periods of arcs, you rip through them.
Yeah.
They don't feel dragged out, and those are always the arcs that do feel like they're longer than they should be in anime. You're like, oh, this could have been easily 3-4 episodes, but then it's always longer for some reason.
Let me see if I can. Where's the one arc I'm thinking of that kind of?
You're thinking of the school festival?
Yeah. Yeah, 15 chapters, and it was only 5 episodes.
Yeah.
But
15 chapters, probably going to have been less episodes, honestly.
yeah.
And yeah, so I'm prone to always go with the source material as well. You know, sometimes people change the changes that they make are
Really depends on the anime, I think.
depends on the studio, the writers that are helping doing the storyboards and whatnot.
Yeah.
But I do feel like My Hero is a very well done anime, and you can't really go wrong with either or.
Yeah.
Obviously, hard to say because it's not done yet.
That's my thing where I'm like,
But-
anime's great. Like you said, consistency's been great. Manga, it's easier to rip through some of those like smaller arcs that don't.
Like, I love Attack on Titan. There's obviously some unreal animated scenes in Attack on Titan. But the reason the manga is better is because the manga is consistent.
Yep.
There's so many things that change throughout Attack on Titan. We go from non-CGI Titans to these horrifically CGI Titans to then also just changing studios. And then we have CGI maneuver gear. We have CGI Titans, which are better than the previous CGI Titans. And a lot more.
That's a sentence, though.
And it's just not the same throughout.
Yeah.
Right? We end up big thing is we end up changing studios, art style changes. Obviously, I thought the art style change was better.
Yep.
It was more accurate to the manga, but it's just if you were to watch it start to finish, you'd be like, "Whoa, like that was a roller coaster." Where if you were to just read the manga, you'd be like, "Okay, the art did get better." That's one of the changes you'll notice, especially in Attack on Titan. The art at the beginning is a little bit rougher, but you're like, "Okay, yeah, that was consistent." So if Bones finishes as strongly as they started,
Then
it's gonna be a
great.
great recommendation for an anime. Of like, hey, you could watch the anime if you have the time. Watch the anime.
If you prefer to read it, read the manga. Like
They're both great.
Yeah. I think similar to you, where the fight scenes were great. I think my little worry is the last arc. I felt like it was confusing at points, like because you let the chapters build up. So I
Yeah,
think
well, if you're
it-
reading week by week, like that's just more of your point of view of that.
Yeah,
arc.
definitely.
We'll have to potentially do an episode where we read the final
Arc
arc
over
again,
again. Yeah.
and give our 2 cents on it. We have not done that, and it might feel a lot better just reading.
That's what
it
I'm
as an
thinking
arc.
it will. Yeah.
Like when the volumes come out and we read them as volumes. Obviously, stuff will also be cleaned up by the
Yeah.
author as well. So I do think it was long, but it might feel a lot better.
I'm excited definitely to see some fights animated.
Yeah. I put this one in here later, but what was who were some of your favorite characters?
I mean, Hawks, great character. Loved Hawks. I love his arc. So I'll put that as my hero.
Okay, and you're
For hero, probably Hawks. For student, I really enjoyed Riot, like Red Riot. I thought he was kind of cool, like him fighting in the arc with Sir Night Eye and stuff like that. Like seeing him being like, no, I need to get stronger, and him looking up to Crimson Riot, I think, was the hero that he looked up to. I just thought he was a really good character that wasn't a main character. Like I enjoyed one of him. For villains, I mean, Dobby was cool. Twice as well, like the Deadpool.
Dobby's design was cool. On top of
his story was
Blue
just
Fire, yeah,
exactly. He was a great character.
He had a lot going for him.
Yeah,
I think for me, hero is probably Endeavor, mostly just because I think his story overall is really well done.
Yeah.
And I hated him at the beginning when you're learning about him and you see how he treats his son. You're like, I hate this dude. How is he the number one hero? And then you keep learning and learning. You're like, and just
the entire family is
it's tragic. Like it is so messed up, and it's dark. When you start looking at the abuse,
I mean, Todoroki not even using like half his powers, like
it's a lot, and it's just his character development is insane in terms of he is apologizing, but it's not and he recognizes that, hey, you don't even have to forgive me. Just know that I am sorry, and I'm going to do everything I can from this point forward to be a better person. And he knows that his family shouldn't just accept his apology.
Yeah.
Like
he knows he's a dick.
Well, he knows he's done horrific things and he doesn't deserve to be forgiven for a lot of it. Right? My favorite class member is Todoroki as well. Similarly, just has a really good story. I think Bakugo has a good story, but he's still just too obnoxious for me at the end. Like he's still screaming all the time, and the whole like, I don't know, the whole murder whatever name, and he's just too much. He's too much. Where Todoroki, like you said, he starts off by being like basically just a nice power user, in spite of his dad, like spitefully.
Yeah.
And he doesn't really want to work with others, and he really that's one thing I really loved about the hero license arc, where Todoroki, from a power perspective, easily should pass.
Yeah.
But mentally, he wasn't.
There's so much more to being a hero, and that's what I enjoyed
mentally,
too.
he wasn't there yet.
Yeah.
And I loved just from Deku forcing him to use both his powers in the sports fest to him failing in the getting his license, and then going through that story of working towards becoming a better person. You have to be a good person, not necessarily the best person if you're looking at Endeavor, but being a good person helps to be a better hero.
Having good morals.
Yeah, for sure.
I think that's the best way to put it, right?
So Todoroki's there. Favorite villain is tougher. There's a lot of good villains. I do think Overhaul was really cool. Cool design, cool power. Great fight at the end. Very evil dude. But yeah, I think if we're just going from a story perspective as well, Dobby. Apparently I'm just all in on the Endeavor family gang. Like,
it's by far the best part of My Hero Academia, I would think.
Yeah,
overall.
they're the flame.
They're the flame that kept that manga alive.
But also just crazy design. The power is simple, but
so complex.
But Blue Fire looks cool.
Yep.
Always looks cool. And just, dude is just not sane. And he looks it. He plays the role great. And he is obvious. It's like hiding in plain sight. Everyone was like, are you related to Todoroki? Are you Endeavor's kid?
Guy? You got fire
we learned that his brother died. Endeavor's one son died. Are you him? And
is that you?
And you're kind of like, he is? He isn't. He is? And he's like, almost like, it's like he's hiding in plain sight.
Yeah.
Where he's like, you're like, oh no. Like there's points where you're like, nah, he's not it. No, he is. No, I guess not.
And I think when the reveal actually happens, I think it's great.
It's a great reveal.
Like,
it's a reveal that you're like, okay, so he is.
Yeah,
like,
we got the answer.
You're not surprised, but you're like,
But it's also a weird, like, good Goosebumps moment where you're like, yes, we were right. But it's also like, dang, we were right. Like,
I knew I was right when the Endeavor arc happens and Dobby almost exclusively is centering him out.
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, well,
We all know you
don't just go after him.
You don't go after the number one hero for nothing.
Yeah, you have a grudge.
Yeah.
So yeah, he is definitely a great villain as well. Did not like that he ended up living. I did not like that part of the epilogue where Todoroki's there and he's like, "What's your favorite food?" And then he ends up telling him. I was like,
Why are you here?
This is cringe.
Why are you here? Moving on quick.
Actually, I want to cover one thing quick. So I believe they're doing, unfortunately, at this point we don't have the results, but I believe they're doing the 10th poll for the entire series of popularity poll. But I thought I'd bring up the latest one, which was the 9th popularity poll, which happened in October 16th of 2023.
Okay.
Was when the poll initially happened. And it was revealed in chapter 425 that what the votes were. In first place, we have Bakugo. In second, Midoriya. In third, we had Shoto Todoroki. Fourth, Dabi. Fifth, Hawks. Sixth, Endeavor. Seventh was Kirishima. Eighth was Tenya Ida, who's the class prez. Ninth was Uraka. And 10th was actually Shoji, who is the multiple arms and limbs and different.
That kind of makes sense.
That was a cool power, cool looking design.
When he finally takes off like the mask and stuff in the final arc, I was like, yes, like good.
Well, and what he was fighting for as well, right?
Exactly. I think that was really good for his character development just at the end.
So I'm not going to go through the whole list because it's like 50 people, but
those mostly make sense.
That's the top 10.
Makes sense. Yeah,
I think
high school.
Bakugo has been like the top forever. He's first in the 8th, first and 7th, 6th, 5th, 4th, 3rd, 2nd.
Jeez Louise.
Everything but first. He was 3rd in the first popularity poll. From that point on,
he
was
he actually got character development.
Yeah.
As soon as he got a little bit, he was up front. That makes
sense. And then Midoriya and Todoroki switch a few times, and then Midoriya's kind of straight second for that point on. But just thought I'd mention that just so people get an idea of where people are feeling.
Yeah. Makes sense.
Yeah. So that's and there is currently one going on. Obviously, I don't know if it's a worldwide one or if it's just Japan, but it might be a worldwide one. It is the end. Wouldn't surprise me. We'll definitely cover it when it's released. Moving on to arcs. So in this series, there is
3 sagas.
3 sagas, a good chunk of arcs. I mean, it is like a very big series overall. 430 chapters.
25 arcs.
430 chapters is long.
Mm-hmm.
These are a healthy series, and there are a lot of arcs. Do you have a favorite?
I'd say my favorite is probably the training camp arc.
Training camp, like the one where they're out in the
woods and everything like that. I think that one explores the entire class as a whole, being able to see how their powers are, how they're able to go against villains. You see a bit more of the villain stuff like that. You see Deku really trying to use his powers, and you kind of see the basis of what kind of hero Deku really wants to be.
Okay.
And then you just have like a really like intense moment with the little kid, like just squirts water at the bad guy after you find out the bad guy killed his parents.
Okay, yeah.
Like that's just a really good. It kind of like it encompasses overall the show, in my opinion.
That's fair.
But for you?
Overall, I was a really big fan of the Rise of Villains saga as a whole.
Yep.
Which includes obviously multiple arcs, but there's a lot of fantastic arcs in there. We have the beginning of the provisional hero license, which leads into obviously the remedial courses. We have the pro hero arc. This also includes the whole arc with Overhaul. So there's a lot of great arcs in here. I think the Endeavor Agency arc's one of my favorites.
Okay.
Obviously this goes very deep into Endeavor, his past, and he's working with his own son.
Yep.
And it's just there's a lot of emotion. You also learn a lot about the hero world because he is running one of the top hero agencies in the world at this point. And I also really enjoyed the sports festival arc, which is kind of just a tournament arc. can't go wrong with a
Just
tournament arc.
Tournament arc. I think it was really good. I would agree with that.
I think we both have our least favorite arc
Same.
is the school festival.
Yeah.
And to be fair, I don't think it was a horrible arc. It is perfectly placed in terms of how heavy the
Yeah, we just saw someone die. We just had a rescue mission for a little girl who can't
and
control
all
her
the
quirk.
backstory about her and
Yeah.
how Overhaul got her and what he was doing
Lemillion
and
losing
how
his
he
power,
was torturing
like-
her, and so there's a lot going on.
Now we get introduced to Gentle Criminal and Lady or Miss
I described to one of my friends Gentle Criminal as
La Brava.
what feels like a One Piece villain, in terms of just his like, ignore the pun here, but his quirkiness.
Yeah.
He reminds me a lot of the guy with the slow fruit.
Yeah.
In a way, where he's not a hardcore villain. He's like a soft villain. And part of him is funny. Like, he is charming, if you will. I just didn't care for him as much in the tone of My Hero.
Yeah, even when he came back at the end, I was like, oh, cool.
Yeah. His power was cool, though.
His power was cool. Lady Brava, who was with him, her power was a little weird because she had the love quirk. And
Yep.
it was like she was able to like make him super like powerful.
Yeah, she was able to
Like-
like amplify his
Yeah.
power. Yeah, the gentle criminal's power was it was like
electricity.
that was it, yeah.
Yeah, allows the user to bestow the property of electricity to anything they touch, which was cool because
Yeah.
I remember he like throws the beam or whatever, and like Deku has to catch the beam or let him get away because if he doesn't let the beam, and yeah,
He was interesting. It was I'm not as big a fan of like the lull period, kind of like not a filler but a filler-ish arc. Because there
felt
were
kind of
important
filler.
things. We got
Yeah.
we got Deku getting his new upgrades.
Yep.
And that it was kind of like him showing us how he's using them. I was also not a big fan of the first arc where we start seeing Deku use the previous users' powers.
Yeah.
Where the class 1A versus class B. That one was like, I wasn't there. Especially in the anime, it did feel like that was one of the weaker
Definitely.
arcs. But that being said, overall, there weren't any arcs that were horrible. Like, they were all decent. We're picking our least favorite in terms of whether pacing, story, or what was currently happening. So I feel like we should, put an asterisk there that it's not necessarily bad.
It's not a bad arc. It just
one of the
feels-
weaker.
Yeah.
One of the weaker arcs.
Exactly. And yeah, I mean, before we wrap up, there's like extras.
Yeah.
So-
So obviously, being a very popular series, My Hero has
3 spin-offs.
spin-off series and multiple movies.
Yeah, all
Uh,
filler movies.
Yep,
right?
they're all
Yeah.
filler. The only thing is they did have filler episodes that led into some movies
Yeah.
and seasons.
Which is
So-
the
sometimes
first
they did,
movie, I think.
and sometimes they didn't.
Yeah.
which was kind of weird.
Yeah,
But then they had canon characters
in that
in movies that show up in the manga eventually.
Yeah.
which is
different.
confusing.
So 4 movies. I've only seen 2 of them. There's My Hero Academia 2 Heroes. Then we have Heroes Rising, and then we have World Heroes Mission, and then one called You're Next, which just came out or is coming out soon.
I've seen the first 2, and I've seen enough. I'm just like,
Yeah,
okay,
Heroes Rising was weird because Deku was able to give Bakugo part of all like the power, and it didn't quite make sense. So we're gonna ignore that.
Overall, I don't really care for the
expanded stuff.
just the non-canon movies, just of shonen stories, because usually
Outside
they
of
kind
One
of
Piece.
well, yeah, it depends. The ones that Oda has started to help with have always
Yeah.
been a little bit more on the better side.
Definitely.
But yeah, it's usually they kind of feel like they're lower quality. The story overall isn't as good, and well, it just kind of just unnecessary overall, I think.
Then there was 3 manga spin-offs.
One of which I will say, from both a rating perspective as well as popularity, has been doing well.
Yeah. So that I'm assuming is My Hero Academia Vigilantes.
Yes.
Which I read start to finish. It's smaller. It's like 128 chapters or so. I don't have the exact number here. But it takes place 5 years before the core My Hero Academia series. And my thing is, if you enjoy the characters and you want to just see a different take on the world, I think this is a good example because you are following people that aren't gonna be in the agencies. They aren't gonna be on that list of heroes and stuff.
Yep.
You see what happens to people that were heroes back in the day, and they just aren't needed as much, or like, and you're seeing random quirks in people that like have just random. Like, there's a quirk I think it's called soccer ball, and it's just like random.
Yep. People who don't qualify to make Class 1 A and B.
Exactly.
At UA, for example.
And you do follow like a slightly younger version of Eraserhead and Present Mike, and how they're kind of raised on the list, and
how they became who they are.
Exactly.
And obviously with that, their friend who has a large impact on the series as a whole is there.
Yeah. But otherwise, the two other ones are My Hero Academia Smash, which is a parody of the main series, which is just TB versions, and it's like gay characters.
Stuff,
It was stupid. And then My Hero Academia Team Up Missions is mostly just team ups with the students and pro heroes.
Because guess what? It's not possible to do in the manga.
Yeah.
There almost should be a spinoff similar to this for One Piece, but just called Daily Ship, like Days on the Sunny or something like that.
Yeah, exactly.
Where some people would love to just see
what are they doing
some
day to
lull
day?
periods of just them hanging out on the ship, what they talk
Exactly.
about, what they eat, what they're doing.
And that's pretty much what this is, really.
Right? And this is, because it's such a big cast, yet like you need a spinoff series to just show them teaming up and doing stuff together. It's crazy, but
Kind of makes sense in a way, but also,
I'm not the biggest fan of spin-off series because I do feel like it's just a money grab, taking advantage of of something that's popular, and they're just trying to maximize that money as much. So that's why I'm never usually reading them.
I mean, I would recommend Vigilantes to people. If they like My Hero, give Vigilantes a try.
For sure.
But don't worry about the other two in my opinion specifically. But yeah.
With that said, I feel like I speak for both of us when I say thank you to Horikoshi Sensei for a fantastic story. As much as we complained about how dragged out the final arc felt,
doesn't mean it was a bad arc though.
It doesn't mean it was a bad arc, but we were still reading it.
Exactly.
We were still there reading it. Like
I was there.
We were there.
I was there, man. I was there the entire time.
You were there for it, and
Exactly.
I really enjoyed the series as a whole. It's definitely, it might not end up being one of my favorites, but it was really well done. Very solid shonen story overall.
If you are into Western comics and you want to try out some manga, I think this is a good introductory manga.
Like we said, great bridge to kind of bridge the West and East in terms of the comics.
Exactly.
And I look forward to seeing what Horikoshi wants to do next.
I'll pick it up, whatever he's working on. Just a reminder that this month's anime is Odd Taxi. Next week will be the episode where we chat about that. So if you're not watching that, you should.
It's a shorter series too.
13 eps.
Should be able to crank it out in the next week and let us know what you think. And on top of that, if you're here till the end, thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. If you're watching on YouTube, drop a comment. What did you think of My Hero Academia as a whole? Was it one of your favorites, the least favorites? Would you kind of rank it around 10? I'd say it's in like the 7 to 8 category for me. And yeah, subscribe if you're not subscribed already. Good percentage of people actually are not subscribed. Shocker. Drop a like. It does help as well. And if you're interested in joining our Discord community, it's in our link tree.
Heck yeah.
Join it. And like Matt said, it's where you can comment on Anime of the Month or even suggest new topics for us to discuss on our weekly podcast, which comes out every Wednesday. And until then, that's it for us.
Exactly. We'll see you next week.
Bye.
Bye.
TNMP, the Nerdy Misfit Podcast. Don't forget to join the island by dropping a follow. Thank you. And see you next week.